The world has become louder than ever, yet most people suffer in silence. Not the dramatic kind of suffering that demands attention, but the quiet exhaustion that settles deep in the chest. The kind that makes you feel tired even after a full night's sleep. The kind that follows you everywhere, no matter how productive you are. You wake up, and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already busy. Messages waiting, news unfolding, other people's lives moving forward faster than yours, it seems. And without noticing, you begin your day reacting. Reacting to notifications, reacting to expectations, reacting to a world that never asked if you were ready. This is not how humans were meant to live, yet somehow this has become normal. If you pause for a moment and listen, not to the world but to yourself, you might notice something unsettling. Your thoughts rarely feel like they belong to you anymore. They are interrupted, fragmented, pulled in 100 directions at once. We scroll to relax, yet feel more restless afterward. We consume information endlessly, yet feel less certain. We stay connected, yet feel increasingly alone. And slowly, without a clear moment of collapse, inner peace becomes a rare visitor instead of a familiar home. Most people assume this is just the price of modern life, that distraction is inevitable, that calm is something reserved for monks, retirees, or people who have already figured everything out. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if inner peace is not lost because life is too demanding, but because we have been trained to give our attention away without realizing its value? Long before smartphones, social media, and 24-hour news cycles, ancient thinkers were already asking a similar question. How does a person remain steady in an unstable world? They lived through wars, plagues, exile, and political collapse. Their world was unpredictable, often brutal, and completely outside their control. And yet, some of them discovered something radical. They realized that peace does not depend on the world becoming quieter, on the mind becoming clearer. This realization gave birth to Stoicism, not as a motivational slogan, not as emotional numbness, but as a practical philosophy for protecting the inner world when the outer world refuses to cooperate. Stoicism was never meant to remove pain from life. It was meant to prevent pain from owning the mind. Today, the battlefield has changed. There are no city walls under siege, but there are mental boundaries being crossed every minute. Your attention is constantly invaded. Your emotions are constantly provoked. Your sense of self is constantly compared. And unlike ancient threats, this invasion is subtle. It arrives disguised as entertainment, as connection, as just 5 more minutes. But the result is the same, a mind that feels overstimulated yet undernourished. You may not notice the moment it happens, but one day you wake up feeling disconnected from yourself. Your reactions feel automatic. Your thoughts feel borrowed. Your peace feels conditional. Conditional on how others respond to you, what the algorithm decides to show you, whether today's news is hopeful or horrifying. This is not freedom. Stoicism begins with a simple but uncomfortable question. What if the real problem is not the world, but our relationship with it? What if inner peace was never meant to be found by escaping distraction, but by learning to stand still while it surrounds you? This philosophy does not promise a stress-free life. It promises something far more realistic and far more powerful: clarity. The clarity to know what deserves your concern and what does not. The clarity to respond instead of react. The clarity to remain grounded even when everything else feels unstable. In a world that profits from your distraction, protecting your inner peace becomes an act of quiet strength. And perhaps the most revolutionary thing you can do today is not to add more information to your mind, but to reclaim it.
The modern condition. Why peace feels so fragile today. There's a quiet paradox at the heart of modern life. Never before have humans had access to so much comfort, information, and opportunity, yet never before have so many people felt mentally overwhelmed, emotionally restless, and internally unsettled. We live longer, communicate faster, and know more than any generation before us. But peace feels increasingly fragile, as if it could disappear at any moment. This is not a personal failure. It is a structural problem. The modern world is not designed for inner stability. It is designed for engagement. Every system around us, technology, media, productivity culture, competes for one scarce resource, your attention. And attention is not neutral. What you attend to shapes how you interpret reality, what emotions dominate your inner life, how you see yourself in relation to others. When attention is constantly fragmented, the self becomes fragmented as well. The illusion of control in a hyper-connected world. Modern society subtly convinces us that we are in control. We choose what to scroll. We choose what to watch. We choose what to respond to. But choice without awareness is not freedom, it is habit. Most people do not consciously decide what deserves their mental energy. They react to what appears loudest, fastest, or most emotionally charged. New breaking news, trending outrage, curated success stories, endless advice on how to be better, richer, calmer, happier. Ironically, the pursuit of a better life often produces a more anxious one. Stoicism begins by questioning this illusion of control. It asks us to separate what feels urgent from what actually matters. Without this separation, the mind remains in a constant state of alert, always responding, never resting. Why distraction hurts more than we admit. Distraction is often treated as a minor inconvenience, a productivity issue, something to fix with better apps or stricter routines. But its deeper impact is psychological and philosophical. Distraction prevents deep reflection, emotional processing, meaningful self-understanding. When the mind never settles, unresolved thoughts accumulate quietly. Stress becomes chronic, not because of big events, but because of unprocessed experience. Stoic philosophers understood this long before neuroscience confirmed it. They observed that suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the stories we tell about them and the speed with which we tell those stories. A distracted mind tells stories instantly. A Stoic mind pauses. That pause is everything. From external validation to inner instability. One of the most destabilizing features of modern life is comparison. We are exposed to carefully edited versions of other people's lives, their achievements, confidence, and clarity, without seeing their doubt, fear, or confusion. Over time, this creates a silent pressure to be constantly improving, to be visibly successful, to appear certain even when feeling lost. Stoicism offers a different metric for a good life. Not popularity, not applause, not constant progress, but inner alignment. Living in accordance with values rather than validation. This shift is not easy because modern systems reward visibility, not wisdom. They reward reaction, not reflection. Choosing inner peace in such an environment requires intention. Why Stoicism speaks to this moment. Stoicism emerged in a world where certainty was scarce. Wars, political instability, exile, illness, none of these were unusual. Life was unpredictable and often unfair. Yet Stoic thinkers did not build their philosophy on optimism, they built it on realism. They assumed that the world will remain unstable, people will disappoint, loss is inevitable. Instead of fighting these truths, they trained the mind to coexist with them without collapsing. This is why Stoicism resonates today, not because modern life is identical to the ancient world, but because the human nervous system has not changed. We still seek safety, we still crave meaning, we still suffer when we confuse control with responsibility. Stoicism does not promise a quiet world. It teaches how to build a quiet center, and in a distracted age, that center becomes essential. The shift from managing time to managing attention. Most self-improvement advice focuses on time management, but time has never been the real problem. Attention is. Two people can live identical lives externally, yet experience them internally completely differently. One is constantly pulled outward, reactive, restless, overstimulated. The other is anchored inward, responsive, measured, calm. The difference is not discipline alone, it is philosophy. Stoicism reframes life not as something to be optimized endlessly, but as something to be met wisely. It teaches that peace is not found by doing more, but by wanting less from what lies outside our control. This idea is uncomfortable in a culture that equates more with better, but it is precisely this discomfort that reveals its truth. A necessary reorientation. Before Stoicism offers tools, it offers orientation. It asks us to turn our attention inward, not to indulge the ego, but to understand it. To notice how quickly emotions arise, how easily attention is hijacked, how often peace is outsourced to external conditions. This awareness is the foundation. Without it, techniques become empty. With it, even simple practices become powerful. In the stages ahead, we will explore how Stoic principles operate not as abstract ideas, but as daily psychological anchors, not to escape the modern world, but to move through it without losing yourself.
Stoicism as psychological armor in a distracted world. Stoicism does not begin by asking you to change your life. It begins by asking you to see it clearly. Most suffering in the modern world is not caused by extreme hardship, but by a constant sense of inner friction, a subtle resistance to reality as it unfolds. We want certainty in an uncertain world. We want control in systems too complex to control. We want peace while staying constantly stimulated. Stoicism exposes this contradiction without judgment. It does not shame the desire for comfort or meaning, it simply reminds us that peace cannot be built on false assumptions. 1. The discipline of control, drawing the invisible line. At the heart of Stoicism lies one of the most misunderstood ideas in philosophy, the dichotomy of control. This principle does not divide life into important and unimportant, but into what is within your control and what is not. Your thoughts, your intentions, your values, your actions. These are yours. Other people's reactions, the pace of societal change, public opinion, unexpected outcomes. These are not. In a distracted world, this distinction is constantly blurred. We feel responsible for being liked, being understood, staying relevant, responding immediately. But responsibility without control creates anxiety. Stoicism teaches selective responsibility. Not everything that affects you deserves authority over you. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you precise. 2. Attention as a moral choice. The Stoics did not talk about smartphones, but they understood something fundamental. Attention shapes character. What you repeatedly focus on becomes familiar. What becomes familiar begins to feel normal. What feels normal quietly becomes who you are. In modern life, attention is constantly redirected towards outrage, comparison, fear, desire. None of these are inherently wrong, but when consumed without awareness, they distort perception. Stoicism reframes attention as an ethical decision. To focus on something is to give it power over your inner state. This is why Stoic practice often begins with observation, noticing emotional impulses, noticing mental narratives, noticing the urge to react, not to suppress them, but to understand their origin. A distracted mind reacts before it understands. A Stoic mind understands before it responds. 3. Emotional resilience without emotional avoidance. One of the most damaging myths about Stoicism is that it promotes emotional coldness. In truth, Stoicism teaches emotional literacy. The Stoics believed emotions arise from judgments. Change the judgment and the emotional intensity shifts. For example, anger often comes from the belief that something should not have happened. Anxiety comes from the belief that you must control the outcome. Envy comes from the belief that another person's success diminishes your worth. Stoicism does not deny these feelings, it questions the beliefs beneath them. This questioning creates space, and space creates choice. In a distracted world, emotions escalate quickly because beliefs are rarely examined. Stoicism slows the process, not to eliminate emotion, but to restore proportion. 4. The power of voluntary discomfort. Modern life is built around comfort. Convenience is marketed as progress. Discomfort is framed as failure. The Stoics held a radically different view. They practiced voluntary discomfort, not to punish themselves, but to train resilience. Simple acts, embracing temporary silence, limiting unnecessary stimulation, choosing simplicity over excess. These practices were reminders. I can endure more than I think. I do not need constant comfort to be okay. In a distracted world, voluntary discomfort is not asceticism. It is detox. It recalibrates desire. It strengthens self-trust. It reduces dependency on external soothing. 5. Identity beyond external roles. Distraction thrives on identity confusion. We are encouraged to define ourselves by productivity, visibility, approval, success metrics. Stoicism offers a quieter identity, character. Not what you have, not how you appear, but how you act when no one is watching. This internal identity is stable. It does not fluctuate with trends or attention. When identity is grounded internally, distraction loses its grip. Not because the world becomes less noisy, but because the noise no longer defines you. 6. Acceptance without resignation. Acceptance is often misunderstood as giving up. Stoic acceptance is the opposite. It is the clear-eyed recognition of reality, combined with deliberate action where action is possible. This balance between acceptance and agency is what protects inner peace. You stop fighting what cannot be changed. You stop neglecting what can. In a distracted world that thrives on urgency, this calm discernment becomes a form of strength. Stoicism does not promise control over life. It promises integrity within it. And that integrity becomes psychological armor. Not rigid, not defensive, but quietly unshakable.
Stoicism in ordinary, everyday moments. Philosophy often feels distant when it remains abstract, But Stoicism was never meant to live only in books. It was designed for ordinary days, for small frustrations, for quiet disappointments that accumulate unnoticed. This is where its true power reveals itself. 1. The morning scroll. You wake up with no urgency. There is time. The day has not asked anything from you yet. You reach for your phone almost automatically. Within minutes, your mind is elsewhere. Someone is doing better than you. Someone is angry about something you haven't thought about. Someone is offering advice you didn't ask for. Nothing has happened in your real life, and yet your emotional state has shifted. A Stoic response is not to condemn the phone, it is to observe the effect. Is this making me calmer or more restless? Is this information necessary or merely stimulating? Stoicism begins with awareness, not restriction. When awareness returns, choice returns. 2. Silence between messages. You send a message and wait. Minutes pass, hours. The mind fills the silence. I'm being ignored. I said the wrong thing. I matter less than I thought. The Stoic recognizes the pattern. Silence is not evidence. It is simply silence. Stoicism teaches us to resist the urge to assign meaning where none exists. This restraint protects peace, not by avoiding connection, but by refusing to let uncertainty become self-judgment. 3. Criticism and the fragile ego. A comment, a remark, a tone that feels dismissive. The immediate impulse is defense. Stoicism introduces a pause. Is this within my control? Is this about me or about the other person? Does responding serve my values or my ego? Often, criticism reveals more about the speaker than the subject. The Stoic listens without surrendering self-respect. Not all feedback deserves internal residence. 4. Comparison without context. You see someone else's success. Your mind begins measuring, timing, progress, worth. Stoicism reminds us that comparison without context is meaningless. You do not know their sacrifices. You do not know their struggles. You do not know what they traded for what they gained. More importantly, their path has nothing to do with your integrity. Stoicism redirects attention inward. Am I acting according to my values today? That question steadies the mind. 5. When plans collapse. You prepared, you tried. Things did not go as expected. Modern thinking often frames this as failure. Stoicism reframes it as reality. Effort is yours, outcome is not. This distinction prevents bitterness. You can care deeply without being destroyed by results. 6. The quiet evenings. At the end of the day, distractions fade, silence returns. For many, this is uncomfortable. Unprocessed thoughts rise. Stoicism encourages meeting this moment with courage, not filling it immediately, not escaping it, but sitting with it. This is where understanding deepens. This is where peace begins to feel familiar again. The quiet cost of constant reaction. There is a cost to living reactively, not one that appears suddenly, but one that accumulates slowly, invisibly. It shows up as persistent restlessness, difficulty concentrating, emotional fatigue without a clear cause. Many people assume this is normal, that this is simply what adulthood feels like. Stoicism invites a deeper examination. The loss of inner authority. When every emotion is shaped by external triggers, the inner voice grows faint. Decisions become reactive rather than intentional. Beliefs are inherited rather than chosen. Values are adjusted to fit circumstances. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. A distracted world rewards quick responses, not thoughtful ones. Over time, this rewires the mind. Stoicism acts as a counterbalance. It restores inner authority, the ability to pause, reflect, and decide deliberately. Why silence feels uncomfortable. Silence has become unfamiliar. Without constant stimulation, unresolved thoughts surface. Emotions that were postponed demand attention. This discomfort is often mistaken for something being wrong. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Discomfort is information. It reveals what has been ignored. It points toward growth. Avoiding silence only delays this encounter. The courage to sit with yourself. Stoic reflection is not indulgent introspection. It is disciplined self-examination, asking, what disturbed my peace today? Why did it have that power? What belief was underneath that reaction? These questions do not accuse, they clarify. Over time, clarity reduces reactivity. From reaction to response. Reaction is immediate and unconscious. Response is measured and chosen. This shift changes everything. It transforms conflict into understanding, anxiety into discernment, frustration into acceptance. Not because life becomes easier, but because the mind becomes steadier. The return of presence. As reactivity decreases, presence returns. Moments feel fuller. Attention feels grounded. You are no longer everywhere at once. You are where you are. This presence is not dramatic. It is quietly nourishing. A different definition of strength. Modern culture often equates strength with dominance, speed, or visibility. Stoicism proposes a different standard. Strength is emotional restraint, mental clarity, moral consistency. These qualities do not attract attention, they attract peace. And peace, once familiar, changes how you move through the world.
Protecting what truly belongs to you. Stoicism does not ask you to become someone else. It asks you to return to yourself, to the part of you that existed before constant comparison, before endless stimulation, before your attention became a resource for others to extract. In a distracted world, peace is often treated as a luxury, something to be enjoyed only when life finally slows down. Stoicism challenges this belief. It reminds us that inner peace is not the reward at the end of a perfect life. It is the foundation that makes a meaningful life possible. The world will remain unpredictable. Technology will continue to accelerate. Opinions will grow louder, not quieter. Stoicism does not deny these realities. It simply refuses to let them dominate the inner world. What Stoicism ultimately protects. Stoicism is not about emotional distance. It is about emotional sovereignty. It protects your ability to think clearly, your capacity to act with integrity, your right to choose calm over chaos. When you stop demanding that the world behave a certain way, you regain the freedom to respond wisely. This freedom is subtle but profound. It shows up when criticism no longer defines you, comparison no longer destabilizes you, uncertainty no longer paralyzes you. Not because these things disappear, but because they no longer control you. Living quietly in a loud world. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing where your responsibility ends. You begin to speak less, but with more intention.
You consume less, but with more discernment. You react less, but understand more. This is not withdrawal, it is alignment. Stoicism teaches that a good life is not measured by how much attention you receive, but by how well you preserve your character under pressure. A gentle invitation. You do not need to adopt Stoicism as an identity. You do not need to quote philosophers or live by rigid rules. You only need to practice one small shift. Before reacting, pause. Before judging, examine. Before surrendering your peace, ask whether it is truly necessary. This pause, this moment of awareness, is where inner peace begins. The final reminder. In a world that constantly asks for more of you, Stoicism quietly asks you to protect what is essential: your clarity, your values, your inner stillness. These are not things you find somewhere else. They are things you remember and choose again and again. Inner peace is not fragile by nature. It only becomes fragile when it is left unguarded. And once you learn how to protect it, the world can remain loud while you remain whole.